Hello and thank you for joining us on this Sunday evening for our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the ripple effects of celebrity politician An Cheol-soo's departure from the main opposition party. It happened last month, but the move is still hurting the Minju Party of Korea. His fellow co-founder called it quits too, dealing the party another deadly blow with a general election not too far away. Lee Soo-eun has our top story.
Another top gun is leaving the main opposition party. On Sunday, Representative Kim Han-gil announced she's leaving the Minju Party of Korea. Kim co-founded the party and represented a minority faction that is not loyal to the current party chairman Moon Jae-in.
I will move toward victory in the April general elections and establish a new political order.
Kim's departure leaves the country's main opposition party down 9 lawmakers and thus 9 seats in parliament since December 13th, when co-founder An Cheol-soo became the first to walk away. The party has tried to overcome the crisis by vowing reform and changing its name from New Politics Alliance for Democracy to the Minju Party of Korea, but Kim's departure puts its back on shaky ground. More lawmakers are expected to defect from the main opposition as well, especially with An's declaration that he would create a new party before the April election. On Sunday, An introduced his new team, announcing the names of those who will spearhead the party's launch. Whether Kim will join them is still in question, as he told reporters that he would need to talk it over with An. But many expect that it's only a matter of time before he does, considering his frequent mention of An in his departure announcement. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye is set to sit down with some of the biggest movers and shakers in politics and economy at her annual New Year's meeting on Monday, where she'll lay out a blueprint for state affairs for 2016. The list of attendees include National Assembly Speaker Chung Yoo-hwa, Supreme Court Chief Justice Yang Seung-tae, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won, the Seoul Mayor, and the chair of the main opposition party, and the other top government officials and experts. The focus will be on economic revival with an emphasis on youth job creation. The agenda will also touch on electoral redistricting ahead of a general election in the spring, labor reform, counterterrorism measures, and North Korea's human rights situation. President Park is also expected to discuss the recent landmark deal with Japan on wartime sexual slavery. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un stressed the economy over the military in his New Year's address on Friday, saying all efforts should be directed toward building an economic power and raising living standards. This is in stark contrast to his previous New Year's speeches, which focused on the country's military strength or nuclear capability. Kim used the word Sungun, the North's military-first policy, only twice in this year's speech, according to a report by the Sejong Institute. That's a noticeable change from his first New Year's address back in 2012, when he used it 17 times. Kim's emphasis on the economy may help explain why the young leader was at the opening of a science technology complex in Pyongyang instead of a military facility on New Year's Day. The complex emphasizes the development of science and technology for growth. North Korea may be gearing up to test its thermonuclear weapons capabilities. That's according to a report released today by South Korea's Chemical, Biological, and Radiological Defense Command. It says the North is preparing to develop thermonuclear weapons at its Punggye-ri nuclear test site, where newly excavated tunnels there could be designed for testing such weapons. The CBR Defense Command also said the North has the foundation for thermonuclear weapons, considering its history of underground and projectile tests, including 3 nuclear tests, all at Punggye-ri. The report also said if the North were to carry out a 4th nuclear test, it would take a new format such as a boosted fission weapon, but that it is unlikely to be ready to test a hydrogen bomb, which North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said last month the regime had developed. This is the first weekend of the new year, and many Koreans are resting at home with their families. But it's business as usual for the South Korean Navy, dedicated to protecting the country. Kim Han-bin followed them to the western border island of Yeonpyeong-do to see what they do to stay sharp.
An emergency siren rings out across a floating naval base near South Korea's western border island of Yeonpyeong-do. Sailors in full gear head straight to their stations. Within 5 minutes, a naval patrol boat hits the swell and is ready for combat. Soon after, the PKG patrol vessel fires dozens of cannon rounds at enemy ships that infiltrated the maritime border, separating the two Koreas. Bullseye. This exercise is part of the South Korean Navy's New Year firing drill at the northern limit line. South Korean naval ships that set sails to NLL conducts a live firing drill to ensure they're well prepared in case the North launches a surprise attack. Operations around Yeonpyeong-do are particularly sensitive. The island came under artillery bombardment from North Korea in 2010, killing 2 South Korean soldiers and 2 civilians. And the waters around the island have seen naval skirmishes in the recent past.
Our Navy personnel go through intensive training and maintain the highest naval readiness. If the enemy provokes, we will strongly counter and secure the NLL.
Since the shelling of Yeonpyeong-do, South Korea's Navy and the Marine Corps have significantly beefed up their military readiness. The island is now home to 3 times as many multiple rocket launchers and heavy artillery than it used to be.
We're prepared to counter any provocations from the enemy. If the North provokes, we'll respond faster, stronger, and more accurately.
Marking the new year, South Korea's Navy has reiterated its pledge to keep the nation's seas safe and secure, so the rest of us can go about our lives in peace. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Yeonpyeong-do.
And it looks like Korea, the United States, and Japan will hold more trilateral meetings this year. On Sunday, Japanese daily Nihon Keizai Shimbun reported the 3 are working to set up a meeting between President Park Geun-hye, President Barack Obama, and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in March. Japanese broadcaster NHK reported the 3 sides are also coordinating a meeting between Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Im Sung-nam, his Japanese counterpart Akitaka Saiki, and U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken in the middle of this month. The focal point will be on confirming enhanced cooperation following Seoul and Tokyo's landmark agreement on Japan's wartime sexual slavery. Other items include security issues in Asia, namely North Korea's nuclear and missile threats and China's actions to enhance its maritime power. It looks like the dark cloud hanging over the global economy will stick around into the new year, dragging down growth largely due to changes to the world's top 2 economies, the U.S. and China. And according to Kim Ji-yeon, Korea will not likely be an exception.
Data compiled by Bloomberg shows financial institutions are projecting global growth of 3.1% on average, the lowest since the aftermath of the global financial crisis in 2009. The International Monetary Fund estimates the global economy will expand by 3.6% this year, but the slightly rosier projection is not exactly a sign of optimism. IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde told German business daily Handelsblatt on December 30th that global growth would be disappointing and uneven this year, as a U.S. rate hike will lead to tighter credit conditions and higher debt servicing costs for emerging markets. The IMF calculated that emerging market companies have overborrowed by $3 trillion in the last decade, reflecting a quadrupling of private sector debt between 2004 and 2014. Data compiled by Bloomberg also shows financial institutions project the U.S. will grow at the same rate as last year at 2.5%, while the Chinese economy will expand at the rate of 6.5% this year, slightly lower than the 6.9% it recorded last year. As China is Korea's largest trading partner, the country is likely to see sluggish growth as well. Seoul-based LJ Economic Research Institute says Korea's growth this year will be slightly lower than last year at 2.5%, while state-run think tank Korea Development Institute predicts growth in the mid-2% range. The Bank of Korea said last month it will lower its growth forecast from its current estimate of 3.2% due to higher external risks. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
To better help developing economies, Korea will raise its official development assistance contributions this year. Korea will allocate more than $2.04 billion to ODA this year, or 2.5% more than last year. The lion's share, or 44%, will go to Asian nations, with the remainder distributed to Africa, South America, the Middle East, and 9 former Soviet republics. The Committee for International Development Cooperation under the Prime Minister's office said the size of Seoul's ODA fund will be equal to 0.15% of Korea's gross national income. The committee added the goal is to raise that to 0.2% of GNI by 2020 in order to catch up to the 0.3% set for OECD Development Assistance Committee members by 2030. Korea has been rapidly expanding its ODA since it went from aid recipient to donor in 2009. Elsewhere around the world, Saudi Arabia's execution of the prominent Shiite cleric Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr has stirred anger among Shiites abroad. Protesters have come out to rally against the execution in several countries, including Saudi's regional rival Iran, where the Saudi embassy was lit on fire. On Saturday, Saudi Arabia executed 47 Muslims, including the cleric, and dozens of al-Qaeda members on terrorism charges, accusing them of adopting a radical ideology, joining terrorist organizations, and implementing various criminal plots. Most of the executed are said to be Sunni jihadists, but the group included 4 Shiites, signaling that Saudi Arabia will not tolerate attacks by either faction of the Muslim religion. In recent years, Saudi Arabia has become increasingly aware of the growing power of Sunni jihadist groups against the kingdom and the growing influence of Iran. And now for a quick look at the weather before we go. In most parts of Korea, the first Monday morning of 2016 is set to be windy and hazy. There will be mild levels of fine dust in the air, but it will be a slight improvement from what we saw here in Korea on Sunday. Temperature-wise, only Chuncheon will start the day at below zero, but it will get up to 6 degrees Celsius later in the day. Seoul and Daegu will both start out the day at 2, but we'll see temperatures rise to 5 and 9 later on. That's all for Korea. Let's check out the weather conditions around the world. And we've come to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching.